Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. With me is Tacitus trainer and the Hall of Famer Bill Mott. Mr. Derby now.
Yeah, they didn't call me that in the past.
This is back-to-back years.
Right, yeah. Well, I think we've had 6 or 7 horses in the Derby, and we haven't gotten to the winner's circle yet, but we're here again this year to try once more, and if it doesn't happen this year, we'll try to be back next year.
You know what's funny about this, and talking with Richard Mandela, and over the years talking with guys like, as you know well, Jack Van Berg and Charlie Whittingham and some of these other great trainers, and they all talk about how it's the diverse business. You know, some people specialize in certain horses. You had one of the great horses of all time in Cigar.
Right.
But people, I guess, still want to know about that Derby, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing anybody will ask you if you meet them in the airport and they say, what do? You know, well, I'm a horse trainer. Oh, they say, have you ever won the Derby? You know what I mean? Well, no, we've run in it, but we haven't won it. So that's the race that's the most recognizable probably around the world, probably not only in the United States or North America, but internationally. I think everybody knows about the Kentucky Derby, and even the casual fan or people that aren't even fans know about the Kentucky Derby.
I imagine this has got to be one of the toughest ones to get ready for as well, because you're going to have them, you know, carrying the weight, coming over here and seeing 160,000 or some people that they're not used to, and anywhere from 18 to 19 trying to beat you. They'll never run the field like that again. So from a handicapping standpoint, it's tough. I imagine it's even tougher from a training standpoint.
Yeah, well, it's very challenging, I think, for the handicappers, but I think that's what makes the race so interesting, is that, you know, you can have a horse in the race and he can be a little bit of a sleeper in there, and as far as from a handicapper standpoint, they can get 20 to 1 on a very good horse sometimes. So, you know, people like to bet on the race. I think it's very good from that perspective, and it's a very challenging race from the viewpoint of a trainer, mainly just to get the horse to begin with, to be lucky enough to have a horse that's durable enough, you know, to go through the grind, what it takes to either start as a 2-year-old and make it through the 3-year-old preps and still be here in good order on Derby Day is a challenge in itself, much less having a horse that's probably talented enough to, you know, be a potential winner of the Kentucky Derby.
Tacitus comes out of the Wood Memorial, looked good in that race. Was there a time along the way, Bill, where you said this could be the next Derby horse for me?
You know, I think we started thinking about that, you know, last fall. We ran him the first time, and he ran a very good 4th the first time we ran him. It was a real hot maiden race in New York, and, you know, all the speed figures came back good, and he showed some gameness and actually showed a little early speed in that race, which we were glad to see. And then came back and broke his maiden in the next race. And from that point on, we gave him a little time in between, just to freshen up and grow and fill out a little bit. But I think at that point we were thinking, well, we've got a horse that is good enough to qualify for some of these Derby preps, and, you know, we'll give him the time, get him cranked up and ready to run, and you know, see if we can earn enough points to get in the Derby. And right now he sits on the top of the list as far as Derby points goes.
One of the favorite things about the Derby, probably like that for the World Series or the Super Bowl too, is all the stats that are brought out and all the stats that are going to be thrown at you next week when we have, you know, about a couple, 3 dozen people around you every day, and they're going to say 2003 Funny Side came out of the wood, and that's been it for Derby.
Yeah.
The wood's not the way to go to the Derby.
Right. Well, you know, they've said that about a lot of races, and I'm sure some people would say, well, the Tampa Bay Derby is probably not the ideal prep, but I believe there has actually, since they've said that, there's been a Derby winner that's come through Tampa. And sometimes the stats are fair, and sometimes they're a little unfair. I guess it just depends on, you know, how you portray them, and they can make a trainer look very average, or they can make them look very good, depending on which ones they bring to light. But the record is the record, and I guess a lot of people will look at that and make their decisions based on that.
See, I always look at it this way. It's like all of them say that can't be done until it's done. They go, oh yeah, of course. Kind of like, remember at one time where they'd go through that pedigree, And if you didn't have that number on that
dosage
pedigree,
index.
the dosage, you could not win it. And then suddenly, if you won it, the dosage index started moving.
Right. I believe Secretariat changed that a little bit,
think
or
so.
Seattle Slew, one of them,
Yeah.
and then they moved the dosage. They changed the dosage to fit the situation, and and of course I was last year we had Justify that won the Derby, won the Triple Crown. And he had not run as a 2-year-old, and I was probably the first one to say, well, he never had a race as a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And it's very unlikely that he could win the Kentucky Derby not having a race as a 2-year-old.
Right.
People always felt that a horse had to have that foundation and that bottom in him as a 2-year-old. And he certainly, Justify overcame the naysayers and got rid of that. But it had been probably 100 years since a horse had won the Derby that had
Right.
not won or run as a 2-year-old.
That's what's crazy about this sport, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it makes it
Yeah, it
interesting.
makes
I
it
mean,
fun.
I think the one of the more fascinating things about it is this time of year with that particular age group, the 3-year-olds, they make dramatic changes from in March, April, and May. I mean, some of them jump forward and some of them jump back, but I think it's that age group that really makes radical changes. You'll get the big sleepy horse that all of a sudden, you start breezing them in April, March, and they all of a sudden they show you something that they've never shown before, and that's always an interesting concept. So I think you've got to watch closely which ones seem to be making that move forward coming to the first Saturday in May.
Does Tacitus have that kind of move, you think, coming
Well,
in?
I think he's been very consistent. We're hoping to move forward another step. His 2 races this year have been very good. I mean, he's coming out of off of a 3-win winning streak. This will be the Derby will be his 3rd race, his 3rd start of the year. A lot of good handicappers would say, well, the 3rd race back is always the best.
Yeah.
So I hope they're right.
You had to be a trainer, didn't you? Your dad was a veterinarian. I mean, you kind of grew up around horses. It was
Right.
like Bill Mott had to become a Hall of Fame trainer.
I loved horses, and I think that's where it started. I mean, I really like horses. I'm very passionate about them, and of course, growing up, I was also very competitive, just being in high school athletics and that sort of thing. And so the fact that, I had a real love of horses and animals in general, but also being competitive, I guess it was a perfect fit.
Yeah. What was your favorite sport?
Well, I was, we came from a small school, so it wasn't at a high level, but played football and wrestled, and I guess I always thought wrestling was probably one of the greatest sports there is. It's a very, it's a team sport, when you're trying to get the team to win, but when you're pretty much one-on-one when you're out there in the mat, and there's a lot of pressure to it. You're out there all on your own. You can't blame it on anybody if you win or you lose. You know what I mean? It's all up to you.
Oh, much like a trainer.
Yeah.
With all the support staff you have and the grooms and everybody else, what are they going to say? Here's Bill Mott's horse. They're not going to worry about how you got over there. It's just you're going to be there with Tacitus.
This is really a team sport. I mean, horse racing is really a team sport. I mean, the effort that it takes to get these horses here. There's a lot of effort that goes into it, and I guess I get to be the spokesman for everybody, and I mean, I sometimes speak for the owners, and I speak for the grooms and the assistant trainers and the exercise riders and everybody that's involved, and so sometimes I wind up in the spotlight, but really I'm only a very small. I'm only a very small cog in the whole makeup of the whole thing. So anytime you get a horse to the Derby, there's a lot of people that can take credit for it.
Yeah, I think of great trainers. They always say, who's that greatest? Right, it's always, who's the greatest that's never won? Remember, for years it was Mickelson was the greatest golfer that had never won, and all, pick whatever sport you want to pick. But I think of trainers that just, that are there. They don't come every year, but seem like when they come, you got to pay attention. I think like a Whittingham, I think of a guy you know well that I don't know if that was your first start, but you were assistant to one of the greats, Jack Vanberg, a Hall
Sure.
of Famer.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
We know Baffert and Pletcher, just like Lucas
Yeah.
did in the past, they're going to try to be here every
Yeah.
year. But you're the guy that's, when you show up,
Yeah.
it seems like you got a contender, or you think you do.
Well, I mean, we've got, sometimes we have a horse, some we like better than others, some have better chances, I suppose, and some fit the profile better of a Derby horse. I mean, we've run some, certainly in the Kentucky Derby, that's 1.25 miles that probably really weren't suited for 1.25 miles. Some of them were good milers, and they just couldn't get they showed up, they ran hard, but they just really weren't meant to be 10 furlong horses, and I think that's a big part of it. I mean, you got to have a horse that's fast, but they can still get the distance, carry the weight, 126 pounds, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know it.
There's a lot to it.
You told me this story, I'd like for you to tell it again, because Jack Vanberg was one of my favorite people to talk to. Always interesting, and you were telling me, as the youngest guy, by the way, Bill Mott, to ever be elected to the Hall of Fame, so you learned pretty quick, and you did all the rest on your own, I think. But you were galloping one of his horses against a horse that you were going to run against in the day of.
Exactly. Well, I think the first year, I think it must have been 1984, I had Taylor Special in the Kentucky Derby, and he had won the Louisiana Derby, and then we came to Keeneland, he won the Bluegrass, and that's when the Bluegrass was only about 10 days before the Kentucky Derby. And we both ran in the Derby. He had Gate Dancer, and then we wound up at Pimlico, and I actually galloped Gate Dancer over in Pimlico. We had Taylor Special and Gate Dancer in the race on the same day, and I actually breezed Gate Dancer the morning of the race. I breezed him 1/4 mile, and he won, and I was fourth. So, but that's the way you did things in the past. I mean, it was more of a, the backside was kind of a family deal, and of course I was always very close to Jack, and he was one of my mentors, and I would have done it any other time as well.
That probably doesn't happen much anymore.
No, you don't see that. I mean, everybody's kind of, what I mean. I guess it would be possible, but I haven't seen it since then.
Richard Mandela said that Bob Baffert hasn't been talking to him nearly as much since Omaha Beach keeps getting better. I wonder, I bet with you, I'm sure everybody, good luck, but probably not the camaraderie as if you brought a long shot in here.
Yeah, I think people know I've been here before, and we've been trying a long time, and I think we've got a lot of people that, probably don't have horses in the Derby that, are rooting for us. I mean, I've had seen a lot of goodwill. Hey, maybe this is your year, and I guess my stock answer is, well, if it's not this year, maybe it'll be next year. So, right. I mean, I'm happy to be here, but and we'll do the best we can, and we think we're in with a couple good chances, but it's one of those things that when it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
I didn't mention Country Home, did I?
Country House.
I didn't mention Country House.
Yeah, and he's doing very
I'm
well.
sorry about that.
That's okay.
I should have.
I mean, I think, Tacitus is kind of the horse that's maybe in the spotlight a little bit because he's, the leading point earner and coming 2 straight wins, and Country House is coming off of a second, a fourth, and a third, and I mean, he's been knocking at the door. He's been, a horse that comes on late in the race, and the 1.25 miles might suit him very well. He could very well be the type of horse that, if they would set a suicide pace up front, so to speak, in the Kentucky Derby, if it's an unreasonable pace, he could be coming along at the end and picking up some pieces, because he's the kind of horse that he's going to close and make a run. It just, he's probably got to have the ideal pace set up in front of him.
Tacitus, what would be the perfect scenario? You had the perfect, you could set it up right now.
I don't think it would necessarily have to, be set up in any perfect way, because he seems to be a little more tractable, a little more versatile. He's not what you'd call a speed horse, but I think if they had a real slow pace, he'd probably be up a little closer. I don't anticipate a slow pace in the Derby, but he's kind of one of those stalker type, mid-pack type horses, and I think that's, all that is decided when they open the starting gates. I mean, because you've got 20 horses where your post is, everybody's going to try to get, you know, the closest position they can get without using their horse too much, and also working their way in to get around the first turn without being hung 5 or 6 wide. I think that's, so, you know, that's the main thing in, you know, in the beginning of the race. I think people are going to be conscious about just, you know, fighting for that position, tactical position, but yet not get hung up too wide at the same time.
And even though you got 2 in this, I'll bet somebody asked you about Cigar somewhere along the way in the next
Well,
2
we
weeks.
get references to Cigar all the time, and you know what I mean. I guess it's naturally it's been a very good thing for me because he's, you know, my name is attached to him, and his name is attached to me in
Yeah,
a sense.
right.
You know, having had such a wonderful career with him, and you know, I owe a lot to him for that, I suppose.
Bill, I really appreciate your time.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Hall of Fame trainer Bill Mott with 2 in this year's Kentucky Derby, Tacitus and Country House. See, I did know the name.
There you go. Okay.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.
Back with more of the racing show right after this.